Pack your things, mother. You're moving out by Friday. Those 8 words, spoken by my own daughter in my kitchen on a Wednesday afternoon, changed everything. But what happened when her father-in-law showed up unannounced 30 minutes later? Well, that's where this story really begins. Let me back up. I'm 74 years old, and I thought I'd seen every shade of family drama life could throw at me. I raised 3 children as a widow after my Harold passed when I was just 42. I've navigated teenage rebellions, helped with college tuition I couldn't afford, and held my tongue through questionable romantic choices. I thought I'd earned my stripes. I thought I understood how the world worked. Turns out, life had one more plot twist waiting for me. It was a Wednesday, like I said, mid-October, with that particular golden light that makes everything look softer than it really is. I was in my kitchen, in my house. The one Harold and I bought in 1978 with a 30-year mortgage. We were so proud of making chicken soup from scratch. The kind with homemade noodles that take all afternoon but taste like love in a bowl. I had my radio playing soft jazz, and I was humming along to something by Ella Fitzgerald, feeling content in that bone-deep way that comes from being exactly where you belong. The steam rose from the pot, fogging my reading glasses. And I remember thinking how I needed to call my friend Dorothy and ask her to book club next week. That's when my daughter Sarah walked in now. I know my children. I know every expression, every hesitation, every tell. Sarah had her father's dark eyes and his stubborn chin, and right then, both were set in a way that made my grandmother instincts tingle with warning. She didn't even say hello, just stood there in her expensive wool coat, the one I'd helped her pick out last. Christmas, with her designer handbag clutched like armor, and delivered her verdict. Mother, we need to talk about living arrangements. I set down my wooden spoon, wiped my hands on my apron, the faded one with sunflowers that Sarah herself had given me 10 years ago, turned to face her fully living arrangements. I echoed, keeping my voice light even as my heart started to pound. Sarah couldn't meet my eyes. She looked at the ceiling, at her manicured nails, at the old clock on the wall anywhere, but at me. David and I have been discussing it, and with his mother getting older and needing more help, we think it makes sense for us to move into your house. It's bigger. It has the first-floor bedroom that would be perfect for her. And the neighborhood is better for the kids' schools. The words hung in the air like smoke from a grease fire. I see, I said slowly. And where, exactly, do I factor into these plans of yours? She finally looked at me then, and I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt maybe, or irritation that I wasn't making this easier for her. David's father has that garage apartment. It's actually quite nice. Very modern. He had it renovated just 2 years ago. You'd have your own entrance, your own space, and honestly, Mother, this house is getting too big for you anyway. All these stairs, the yard work, the maintenance, wouldn't it be easier? Easier. That word again. The word people use when they want you to go along with something that benefits them while pretending it's for your own good. I looked around my kitchen, at the notches on the doorframe marking where my children had grown year by year, at the burn mark on the counter from the time 10-year-old Tommy tried to make me breakfast in bed and nearly set the house on fire, at the window over the sink where I'd stood thousands of times, washing dishes and watching my kids play in the backyard, watching Harold mow the lawn before the cancer took him, watching the seasons change year after year. Sarah, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. This is my home. I know that. But no. I held up one flour-dusted hand. You don't get to, but this. You just told me you want me to pack up my life and move into someone else's garage so you can have my house? Do you hear yourself? Her face flushed red. Don't be dramatic. It's not someone else's garage. It's practically family. And we're not kicking you out. We're offering you a solution that works for everyone. Everyone except me, apparently. Oh, for heaven's sake. Sarah's voice rose, that edge of frustration she got when things weren't going according to her perfect plan. I knew you'd be difficult about this. David said you would be. We're trying to make smart choices here, Mother. David's mother needs care, and she can't live with his father anymore. You know how they are. This house is perfect for our situation. The apartment is perfect for you. Why can't you just— The doorbell rang. We both froze. Sarah went pale, all that righteous anger draining from her face in an instant. She looked at me with something close to panic. Who is that? I asked. I don't know. But she did. I could see it written all over her guilty face. I marched to the front door, Sarah trailing behind me with whispered protests. When I pulled it open, I found myself face to face with Walter Morrison, David's father, a man I'd met exactly 4 times at family gatherings where we'd exchanged pleasantries about the weather and the quality of the dinner rolls. He stood on my porch in a checked flannel shirt and worn jeans, holding a casserole dish covered in aluminum foil. He was a tall man, probably around my age, with silver hair and the kind of weathered face that speaks of a life spent mostly outdoors. His blue eyes met mine with an expression I couldn't quite read. Mrs. Walsh, he said, his voice a deep rumble. I hope I'm not interrupting, but I thought I should come by. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to stay with me. Subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It warms this old heart to know where my words travel. Mr. Morrison, I said, finding my voice. What brings you by? He glanced past me to where Sarah stood frozen in the hallway, then back to me. May I come in? I think we need to have a conversation. I stepped aside, because what else could I do? He walked into my living room with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in their own skin, set the casserole on my coffee table, and turned to face both of us. Sarah, he said, not unkindly, did you tell your mother about your plans? My daughter straightened her spine. We were just discussing it, whom. Walter folded his arms. And did you mention that I had no idea about any of this until David told me last night that he was moving his mother into Eleanor's house and Eleanor into my apartment? The silence that followed was deafening. You didn't know? I asked, looking between them. Walter shook his head, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Not a clue. And let me tell you, I was pretty surprised to hear that I'd apparently agreed to take in a house guest. No offense, Eleanor Ream, sure, you're lovely company, but I like my solitude. That apartment is my workshop. It's where I go to get away from people, not to host them. Sarah's face had gone from pale to bright red. David said you were fine with it. David, Walter said slowly, told you what you wanted to hear, so you'd go along with his scheme. Same thing he told me said. You were all in agreement. Seems like he was hoping we'd all just accept it as a done deal once everything was set in motion. I sank into my favorite armchair. The one Harold and I had bought at an estate sale 30 years ago, reupholstered twice since then. My legs felt suddenly shaky. So this was David's plan. To manipulate everyone? Walter moved to sit on the sofa, gesturing for Sarah to sit too. She remained standing, arms crossed defensively. He sighed. Look, I know my son means well. He's trying to solve a problem his mother does need help. And your house here would work better for that than their current place. But you don't solve problems by bulldozing over people. Dad would never. Sarah started. Sarah Walter's voice was gentle but firm. He did, and I think you know it. She sank onto the sofa then, all the fight going out of her. I watched her carefully. This daughter of mine who'd grown from a sweet girl into a complicated woman I didn't always understand. I could see the moment reality crashed through her carefully constructed justifications. Oh God, she whispered. What have we done? Well, I said, surprised by the calmness in my own voice. You tried to evict your mother from her home and volunteer someone else to take her in without asking him? That's what you've done. Sarah looked up at me, tears brimming in her eyes. Mom, I'm so sorry. David made it sound so logical. His mother really does need help, and this house really would be perfect. And the apartment really is nice, and I didn't think about what it would mean to you. I didn't think about it being your home. No, I agreed. You didn't? Walter cleared his throat. For what it's worth, Eleanor, I brought you a tuna casserole. It's my specialty. Figured you might need some comfort food after the day you've had. I couldn't help it. I laughed. A real, genuine laugh that bubbled up from somewhere deep in my chest. Here I was, in the middle of a family crisis, and this man I barely knew had brought me a casserole like we were at a church social. That's very kind of you, Walter. Please, call me Walt. Anyone who's been volunteered to be my roommate without consent deserves first-name privileges. Sarah looked between us, confusion and relief mixing on her tear-stained face. You're not angry. Oh, I'm angry, I assured her. I'm furious, actually. But I'm also 74 years old, and I've learned that staying angry only hurts yourself. We'll deal with this. But first I looked at Walt. I think we need to eat some of that casserole and figure out what actually needs to happen here. The three of us moved to the kitchen, where my soup was still simmering on the stove. I ladled out bowls while Walt served his casserole, and Sarah, to her credit, set the table without being asked something she hadn't done since high school. We sat in my breakfast nook, the late afternoon sun slanting through the lace curtains I'd hung 20 years ago, and we talked. Really talked. Maybe for the first time, Sarah explained about David's mother, Margaret, who was developing dementia and could no longer live alone. About how David's father and Margaret had divorced years ago, but he still felt responsible. About how they'd been struggling to find a solution that didn't bankrupt them, or sacrifice their own family's needs. Walt talked about his life after the divorce. How he'd built that apartment over his garage as his sanctuary, his workshop where he did woodworking and restored old furniture. How he loved his ex-wife still, in the way you love someone who shared half your life, but couldn't live with her again. And I talked about Harold. About building this home with him. About raising our children here. About how every room held memories that felt sacred. About how the thought of leaving made me feel like I was abandoning everything I'd built, everyone I'd loved. But, I added, Looking at Sarah, I also understand that families need help sometimes, that we have to be flexible. So let's talk about real solutions, not someone else's manipulations. We brainstormed for hours. Walt, it turned out, had a sharp mind for logistics. Sarah, when she wasn't caught up in David's schemes, had a generous heart. And I, despite my age, still had plenty of fight left in me. By the time the sun was setting, we'd sketched out a real plan, not David's plan, our plan. Sarah and David would stay in their current home. Margaret would move into my finished basement I'd converted it years ago into a cozy apartment for when my mother was aging. It had a bedroom, a small kitchenette, and a bathroom with grab bars already installed. I'd live upstairs in my own home, but I'd have help with Margaret's care from a rotation of family members and a part-time aide. Walt offered to help with the renovation work needed to make the basement more suitable, and to build a small greenhouse in my backyard, something I'd always wanted but never gotten around to. In exchange, I'd make him dinner once a week and teach him how to make proper soup, not just casseroles. Deal, he said. Shaking my hand across the table with a grip that was firm and warm, Sarah was crying again, but different tears this time. Mom, are you sure? You'd really be willing to? I'm willing to help my family, I interrupted. But on my terms, in my home, with my agency intact? That's the difference. She nodded, understanding finally settling over her features. I need to talk to David. Yes, I agreed. You do, and you can tell him that if he ever tries to make decisions about my life without consulting me again, he'll find out exactly how terrifying a 74-year-old woman can be. Walt grinned. I believe you. After Sarah left chastened but determined to make things right, Walt and I cleaned up the dishes together. It was companionable, easy. He washed, I dried, and we moved around each other in that practiced way of people who've spent lifetimes in kitchens. You know, he said as he handed me a bowl, I think we're going to be friends. Eleanor Walsh. I think you might be right. Walter Morrison, Walt. Walt. He left with the promise to return on Saturday with his tools and a plan for the basement renovations. As I closed the door behind him, I stood in my quiet house and took a deep breath. The soup was ready. My home was still mine, and somehow, in the span of a few chaotic hours, I'd gone from being treated like a chess piece to being the queen on the board. That was 8 months ago. Margaret lives downstairs now, and some days are harder than others. Dementia is a cruel thief of memories and dignity. But she's here, she's safe, and she's family. Sarah comes by 3 times a week to help. We've rebuilt something between us, not quite what we had before, but something stronger. Maybe. Something forged in the fire of hard truths and harder conversations. David apologized, eventually, and I forgave him. Because that's what you do. But I also made it clear that my forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, and that trust, once broken, takes time to repair. And Walt comes by every Wednesday evening for dinner. I teach him to cook, he teaches me woodworking. We've become the best of friends, much to everyone's surprise, including our own. He's helping me write my memoirs, says my stories need to be preserved for my grandchildren. Just last week, as we sat in my kitchen sharing a pot of the soup he'd finally learned to make properly, he raised his glass of wine to me. To Eleanor, he said, who taught a whole family what it means to stand your ground with grace. I clinked my glass against his. To Walt, who brought a casserole to a battle and somehow helped win the war. We laughed. 2 people in the autumn of our lives who'd found an unexpected friendship in the chaos of family drama. My house still stands, with its creaky floorboards and its memories soaked into the walls. I still sleep in my own bedroom, still tend my garden, still host my book club every 3rd Thursday. But now there's also Margaret downstairs. Sometimes lucid and sometimes lost, but always cared for. There's Sarah, learning what it really means to honor her mother. There's Walt, teaching me that new friendships can bloom at any age. And there's me still here, still standing, still the mistress of my own home. Because here's what I learned from all of this. You can be kind without being a doormat. You can be flexible without being moved. You can help your family without sacrificing yourself. And sometimes the best thing you can do is say no, loud and clear, and then find a better yes together. I'm 74 years old. I've buried a husband, raised 3 children, weathered more storms than I can count, and come out the other side still standing. Still strong, still myself, and if that Wednesday afternoon taught me anything, it's that as long as I have breath in my body, no one, not even my own child, gets to decide where I belong. Only I get to make that choice. This house is mine. This life is mine, and I'm not going anywhere, well, except maybe to Walt's workshop on Saturday mornings to learn how to make a bookshelf, and to book club on Thursday evenings, and to the garden center next week, because spring is coming, and those tomato plants won't plant themselves. But you know what I mean, if you've made it this far. Thank you for listening to an old woman's story. Life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. But if you stand firm in who you are and what you deserve, you'd be amazed at what you can weather, and who knows, you might even make a friend or two along the way. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have soup to make and a life to live.